Okay, this video is to review the framing and composition vocabulary that we've learned in the photography unit. So first of all, when I say the word composition, what I'm talking about is how you take the photo. So there's many different ways to take a photo, and you're going to learn different techniques so that you can accomplish these different styles. So when you think about taking a photo, there's a couple things you want to think about. First thing you want to think about is, what's the composition? Are you going to have a symmetrical photo? Is it going to be balanced on each side? Is it going to be asymmetrical? Do you want to do a leading line shot? Are you going to have a foreground background shot? You want to do patterns or a framing shot or a look room color, or do you want to take an abstract photo? Those are the different options for compositions. Then you want to think about your frame size. So this is the distance of the camera to the subject. So do you want to take an extreme close-up shot of somebody? Do you want to take just a close-up? Do you want to take a medium shot or a long shot? And then finally, you want to think about the camera angle. So are you at a high level, a low, high angle, a low angle, or eye level? And then finally, you're always going to think about the headroom of the subjects and rule of thirds. And I'm going to go through each one of these concepts so that you understand how to take a photo using these different techniques. So the first one is, rule of thirds. So what rule of thirds is, basically it's this idea that when you're taking a photograph, when you look through the viewfinder, the frame, you want to imagine that there's a tic-tac-toe board layered on top of your frame. And the rule of thirds is the idea that you don't want to ever center your subjects in the middle of the frame. It just doesn't look appealing to the eye. You want to have your subjects, or in this case, if you're taking a picture of a bottle, like an object, you want to shift them over so that they intersect with one of the horizontal lines. Or if you think about like the vertical lines, if you think about the horizon, that's the horizontal line, right? So just try to not center your subjects. And here's another example of it. So if you look at the incorrect shot with the boy, he's centered in the middle of the photograph. So that's not such a great shot. But in comparison, the one with the girl, her eyeball falls right where those lines intersect. So if you see that there's 4 intersecting parts where the lines intersect, you want to try to have your center of the photograph, what you want people to look at, fall on one of those intersecting lines. So her eyeball falls in that like top right quadrant. Same with this. Here's another close-up shot of a girl. Her eyes fall at that lower right-hand quadrant. Okay, she's not right in the center of the photograph. She's shifted over to that side. So if you forget anything with rule of thirds, just remember, don't put your subjects in the center of the frame. Shift them over to one side or the other. Okay, then we get to this idea of look room. Look room is the space that is the empty space in the direction your subject's looking. So when your subject is turned sideways to the camera, they call it profile, like a profile shot if I'm looking sideways. What you want to do is you want to leave look room. So you want to leave that empty negative space in the direction your subject is looking. So this runner is moving towards the right side of the frame, so that empty space is towards the right side of the frame. As opposed to the incorrect version up top, it looks like she's going to just run into the edge of that frame. You don't want that. Here are 2 more examples, right? So the bottom photo is correct. There's enough look room. There's space in the direction she's looking, as opposed to the top frame. That photo looks like that boy in the red coat is just going to run right into the edge of the frame. So you would want that look room on the opposite side. Okay, then we talk about balance. Balance is having to do with the weight of the photo. So essentially, you can have 2 types of balance. You can have symmetrical balance or asymmetrical balance. Symmetrical balance is even. Think of it as being symmetry. If you cut your photograph down the middle of the frame, what's on one side is exactly what's on the other side. And of course, these are real people you're dealing with, so it's not going to be exact, but these are 2 men laying on a bench. If you cut down the middle of that bench, it would almost be a mirror, or like a mirror image of each other. as opposed to asymmetry is off balance. So what's on one side of the frame is not what's on the other side of the photo. So if you want to communicate characters that are off center or wacky, or just things aren't right with the world that you're trying to portray through your photograph, you would use asymmetrical photos, as opposed to symmetry is very balanced and calm and stable. Oops. So here's another couple shots, right? That photo of that building right there is perfect symmetry, because if you split it down the middle and fold it in half, the building is reflected on both sides equally. And same if you cut it in half horizontally, because of the reflection of the building in the water, you also have perfect symmetry. Same with this staircase. If you shoot directly down that staircase and cut it in half, because there's a man at the bottom of the staircase on both sides, it's even balanced, equally balanced. And with that, the top picture with the hands holding the baby, you've got a hand on both sides, a mirror image of each other. That's symmetry. As opposed to asymmetry is right here, we've got, and my image is in the way. If you look at the bottom photo, this girl at the bottom right side of the frame, she's carrying most of the weight of that photo, right? She's kind of the center point, the focal point of that photo. And then she's got a mass of people, men armed in black, coming at her. So that it's uneven balance, right? She's bearing the most of the weight in that photograph. Same with the bike. It's not centered, it's off to the side. And then the balance, the asymmetry comes with that window that's on the opposite side. So that's off balance. Then we get to leading lines. What leading lines are is you want to find anything that creates a line that draws your eye as the viewer back into space. So photos are two-dimensional, meaning they're flat images. But with leading lines, you can create depth, like on the z-axis, where like when we look at this photo right here, it looks like we could go back into space. And our eyes with those leading lines draw us to that focal point. So we're looking at that woman because she's standing in the center of those railroad tracks that lead our eyes back into the photograph. And that's what a focal point is, the part in the photo, the section in the photo that you want your audience to look at. So you can create a focal point with many different things. You could have it with color. In this case, this photo, this girl is in white and everybody else is a sea of black. That's creating a center of interest. Or like I just showed you the leading lines photo, the leading lines are leading us to a focal point. And here are other examples of leading lines. So if you stand in the middle of a road and shoot at a low angle down the center of the road, our eyes as our audience are going to follow those lines. Same thing with this bridge. It's a very symmetrical shot. You're standing in the middle of the bridge. The lines on the railings bring us back into space. Those are leading lines. If you were, say, in a hallway and there were lockers on either side of the hallway, that would lead us back in space. Those are what leading lines are. Next thing we get to is called viewpoint. And the viewpoint is basically your camera angle. What is the height of your camera? So is your camera going to be eye level, meaning we're staring directly into your character's eyes? Or are you going to bring your camera up high and shoot at a high angle, like the girl at the bottom of this slide? She's looking up at us, so we're shooting at a high angle on her. Or are you going to come from a low angle, like the basketball hoop? Our camera's low, shooting high. So don't always just shoot eye level. You see tons of photographers out in the field. They're never just standing straight and shooting from their height. They're getting low, they're getting high, they're standing on things, they're laying in the street, different kind of angles. And different angles communicate different messages, right? So high angles, if you're shooting at a high angle down on someone, in movies, like it makes them look a lot smaller in the frame, so they look a little bit smaller and weaker, as opposed to if you shoot low angles and you shoot up at someone, they fill the frame so they have more power. So a lot of times, like the heroes in movies and like the heroes and the villains get shot at low angles. as opposed to the victims in films. Usually the camera's up high, shooting low. The other thing to think about is if you're shooting with children, children are usually smaller than the person taking the photo, so you want to drop down to their eye level. So if they're small, if somebody's shorter than you and you're taking their picture and you want an eye level shot, you've got to lower yourself to their level to get that eye level shot. Okay. Next thing to think about is your background. You always have a background in your shot, and depending on what kind of background you use, can either distract people from your shot or it can add to the effect. The rule with backgrounds is you want to keep them plain and you want to keep them simple. So these backgrounds, ones like this background, this wall is green. Also, color really helps people kind of pop. So because the background's all green, we notice the subject. We're focused on him, not the background. Same thing with this wall. It's very plain. The other thing is it has some texture to it. Texture is like the lines that are on there. Or even this woman here with the in front of the trees, like the branches. Those have texture to them. And it helps us focus more on the subjects and not on your background. So you want to avoid having distracting backgrounds. So think about when you're taking shots, if there's people in the background, you want to wait till they pass or move to a different location. If you're shooting at different angles and there's street signs or lamps and things like that, those are going to be distracting as well. Same thing with if you're inside in an office or in a house. If you've got, like my background, bookshelves and a lamp and some flowers, it's too distracting and it makes for a bad photo. So you want to think about how can you move locations or move your camera so that you have a plain, simple background. And usually something with color would work. Or even like a brick wall would be really nice, that texture. Or like if you're outside, there's like graffiti or color on a wall. That's also a really interesting background. Okay. Next technique is to think about patterns. And what patterns are is a repeated element in the frame. So you see this a lot with like architectural photography. So these are in the bottom right-hand corner, those are stairs, a staircase that's kind of creating that really interesting pattern. Those windows repeated, creating a pattern, fences. You can use objects to create different kind of patterns. You can look around. Tablecloths have usually patterns on them. Sometimes clothes will have interesting patterns. Try to use the patterns that are in your environment. All right, then we get to depth. And what depth is it's about creating, just like the leading lines, you're taking a photo, which is two-dimensional, and you're trying to give it depth like three-dimensional. And so the way that you do that is you shoot what's called foreground, background photos. So the boy holding this butterfly in the bottom photo, the butterfly is close to the camera and he's far away. So it creates a nice depth that's happening. And they also did a technique where they blurred out the background, and sometimes your cameras will do that. There's like a portrait mode that you can do that. That's a really nice effect. But the idea is to put something in the foreground, like for instance, if I have this water, something in the foreground and something in your background, then your audience gets a sense of like a 3-dimension, right? Or like if you want to do like little heart shapes or things like that, it's more interesting to like almost like stack your layers. So you've got a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. Okay, framing is a really cool technique. Basically what framing means is you're creating a picture within a picture. So you can do that by many things. Usually like doorways will be a good thing to shoot through, windows, anything that creates a shape that you can shoot through so that you create a picture within a picture and guide our eyes to a focal point. So like this basketball hoop, by shooting at a low angle up through the hoop, we're focusing our attention on that airplane. That's a much more interesting shot than just shooting an airplane, right? Same thing with that building. If you want our focal point to be on that building, and shooting through a fence with a hole in it, or even just shooting through a fence is a really cool framing idea. Or when you're outside, a lot of times you'll see this. People will, like if there's branches, you want to stand behind the branches and shoot through the branches to the open space. just to create that like kind of depth. All right, then we get to what's called frame size. And what frame size has to do with is the distance of the camera to the subject. So in this case, you've got 4 different types of frame sizes. It starts with the extreme close-up. And you see the shot right down there of, those are Muhammad Ali's hands. That's a famous photographer, Gordon Parks, who took that picture. If you do an extreme close-up like that, you're getting details in the scene. You're directing your audience's attention. If that was a wider shot, if the camera was further back, our eyes wouldn't be directed to the scars that he has on his hands. And so you're saying something when you decide to shoot like that. So people can read into that image and think, well, Muhammad Ali was one of the greatest boxers on earth. And this picture to me, because they're showing his wounds and his scars, is kind of showing like the effort and the grit that it takes to become great, right? I wouldn't see that if I was in a wider shot. Then we have a close-up, and close-ups are mainly when you're getting people's faces. So it's usually like shoulder to the top of somebody's head. We're focusing on their emotions. So if you want in your films or your slideshows, you want to show emotion, you're going to want to shoot a close-up shot. And then you have 2 more. You have a medium or a long. The medium shot is, think about M for middle of the waist to the top of the head. And then long shot is their whole body. You're far back, and usually long shots, you get to see the setting and the scenery, and you can see character action through long shots. And then medium shots are usually used for dialogue scenes when characters are talking. Okay. This concept of headroom is a really important concept, and you want to apply this to every time you take a photo. So if you're taking a photo of someone, you want to think about the space above the top of their head. That's what headroom is. You don't want too much headroom like this one on the left, because then your audience's eyes are just going to be looking up and the focus goes away from your subject. And so like this, it's just like too much headroom. And then you don't want too little where you're cutting off the top of your subject's head. You want it just right. So it's kind of like the Goldilocks effect. Just keep that frame, the top of your camera, close to the top of your subject's head. That's what headroom is. Okay, and headroom, just to go back to that idea of look room, is similar to look room, except for headroom is distance vertical from the top of your head, and look room is horizontal distance, right? So if she's turned sideways, that look room is in the direction she's looking. Okay, then we get to cropping, and cropping is kind of a trickier, more advanced concept, but what it basically means is when you're framing a subject, like if you're getting a close-up of someone, you don't want to cut them off of the neck because it looks like you're chopped, like you're decapitating them. It looks like they don't have a body. So you want to leave a little bit of shoulder room. Like, don't cut people off at their joints. Leave a little bit of shoulder so that your audience can imagine that there's more of her body. Same with like if you cut off at the knees or her elbows, it's going to look like she's missing a leg or an arm. So give them kind of more space. Or go in between the limbs. So cut off at the thighs or give them more shoulder room, things like that. Okay. The next couple concepts are when you're going out there, just experiment. Some of the best photos are the ones that you capture kind of in the moment. And they call them like happy accidents. So think about ways that you can experiment with color and lighting and your frame sizes to capture a unique photo. And then also be thinking about color. Color is a great way to direct your audience's attention to focal points. So like, for instance, this photo at the bottom here, another famous photographer took this. He's using color to let us focus on that guy in the middle, right, in the green. Everybody else is in red, he's in green. So how can you use color in your photography to direct your audience's attention to people? And like there's different types of terms when we're thinking about color. You can think about like these colors are all really bright and saturated, meaning they're just like really intense colors. But you can also do what's called black and white, or a desaturation, a desaturated image, or a monotone color, meaning one color. So this photo here, it's just black and white. It's her shadow, and it creates this high contrast between light and dark. So always think about kind of what colors you're going to be using, and if you're going to shoot in black. And back in the day, you had to actually decide before you went out and took a picture. You would decide whether you're going to shoot in black and white or not. Now, luckily, we have editing tools that we can do after the fact. And we'll skip this, but just so you know, every color has a meaning. So if you want to create a mood with your piece, like your poem has mood and theme and tone, you can do that with your photography too. So like warm colors, like oranges and yellows, they're really like warm and calming, as opposed to like or blues and like cool tones. The blues and the grays are more calm and soothing than, say, like your reds that are more lively and energetic. Okay, and final tips is just know that there is this hour called the golden hour, and it's right when the sun is starting to go down, and it's beautiful light. So if you ever want to take photos, that's a great time of day to take photos because the light's really soft and orange glow. Same like right before the sun, as the sun's coming up. And then think about if you're shooting somebody in a window, if you point your camera directly into the sun, you're going to backlight people, which means they're going to go into shadow or they're going to be dark. So just avoid shooting your camera directly into a window or into the sun so that you won't have that like backlit effect. And then the last part is that you can also get real creative, and there are photographers out there who just shoot abstract images. So really you're placing the emphasis on like shapes and patterns and colors and textures. And a lot of the times you're using light to create these different abstract images. So you don't always have to capture like somebody's whole body. You could get real abstract with the way that you take a picture of the human form. Okay, so good luck with your photo slideshow. Remember, you need 10 photos, each with a really strong composition, and using different camera angles, using different frame sizes, using all these different concepts that we just reviewed. So I'm going to just go back to this very front page. If you need to pause and look at this first screen, these are all the different options you can choose from when deciding what kinds of photos you want to take. Okay, good luck.